As you head up to Mitchell Rock, you'll encounter both Coulter pines and gray pines.
And when they're together, they're easy to tell apart. Even though they each have needles of 3, the Coulter pine is a lot darker, the tree is more robust, the branches tend to point upwards.
The gray pines, on the other hand, are wispy-looking, often with multiple trunks. A forest of gray pines
resembles a drunken forest staggering up an oak-studded hillside. These 2 trees are both drought pines. They're open at the top, they don't tend to grow in thick rows, and they both have huge, heavy pine cones. And the idea is with a big pine cone, you can have larger seeds and more food for a young tree to get started, which is helpful in drought areas.
The Coulter pine is primarily a Southern California tree.
It reaches the limit of its northern range on Mount Diablo and Black Diamond Mines Regional Preserve, and it's famous for having the heaviest pine cones in the world.
The Coulter pine was named for Thomas Coulter, an Irish botanist operating out of Monterey in the 1830s. The Scottish botanist David Douglas was there at about the same time.
He actually palled around a lot. Coulter was so pleased when he had found this tree with those heavy pine cones. Douglas had already found the sugar pine, which had the longest pine cones, and now the Irishman had the heaviest pine cones. And they've been measured up to 8 pounds.
Coulter pine cones are more elongated.
They've been referred to as looking like sugar loaves. And the gray pine cones look like pineapples. The squirrels like to gnaw them off. Then the cones fall to the bottom and break open. And of course, you don't want to be down there because it'll be the end of you. The Coulter pine has very nasty, sharp talons covering the nuts. You get hit by a Coulter pine, it would probably kill you. A gray pine would just knock you out. They're not quite as sharp. Coulter pines are an interesting tree. A few individuals have serotinous pine cones that are sealed with resin, and they actually have to be cooked before they'll melt and open up, dropping the seeds. Most of the Coulter pines don't have that. They have the open pine cones, and the seeds fall out every year. But it's a great adaptation because after a fire, they're ready to go.
As you head up the trail, you'll see some pines with blackened trunks that withstood the Great Fire of 1977. The rest of the forest grew back as a matchstick forest, with many thin trees growing close together. In recent years, those close-knit coulters have been thinned out by beetle infestations. Nuts from both Coulter and gray pines are tasty. That's why the gray pine was originally called the digger pine.
The settlers would see the Native Americans around these pine trees collecting both the nuts and some of the root fibers to make basketry. So they saw that what they thought was digging, so they called them digger Indians, and the pine tree a digger pine, kind of a pejorative term. But they are edible, the nuts, high in fat and protein. And John Muir had a great description of a Native American village.
The men climb the trees like bears and beat off the cones with sticks while the squaws gather the big, generous cones and roast them until the scales open sufficiently to allow the hard-shelled seeds to be beaten out. Then, in the cool evenings, men, women, and children, with their capacity for dirt greatly increased by the soft resin with which they are all bedraggled, form circles around campfires on the bank of the nearest stream, and lie in easy independence, cracking nuts and laughing and chattering as heedless of the future as squirrels.